You can see, if you look closely here in this view, you can see the vent from the strongback out at pad 39A. This occurs as the chill down or thermal conditioning of the liquid oxygen transfer line that runs up the strongback gets underway. This chill down, the thermal conditioning, takes a few minutes and is in preparation for the start of flow of super cold densified liquid oxygen into stage 2 that begins at about T-minus 16 minutes. So the countdown running right on schedule. No technical issues that we've heard at this point in the countdown. The weather remains a factor, though, with weather rules still observed red here at Kennedy Space Center. Here's a nice shot of that venting from the strongback. 18 minutes, 38 seconds until liftoff time.
Stage 2 lock load has started.
Liquid oxygen loading on stage 2 is now underway. This is the fourth and final propellant tank to be loaded in the SpaceX countdown this afternoon. The weather forecast has slightly improved and now shows a 30% chance of acceptable or go weather at the time of launch. There is an instantaneous launch opportunity this afternoon at 3:54 p.m. Eastern Time, 16 minutes from now. However, weather rules still are observed red or no-go at this time. 3 weather rules are currently exceeding or outside the limits of the Falcon 9's and the range's launch weather criteria. So SpaceX is hopeful that the weather conditions will improve, but the chances are still that the weather will not allow the launch today. But those conditions could evolve and change over the next 15 minutes or so. As I mentioned, this mission is CRS-26. It's the 26th resupply mission to the International Space Station. And one of the main cargo elements on this mission is the next pair of IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Arrays. This video you're seeing now comes from a test or demonstration of the rollout solar array technology outside the space station back in 2017. You can see this rollout solar array is spooled up at launch to fit inside the trunk of the SpaceX Dragon cargo capsule. They release tension on that roll or spool during the rollout process, and that allows these solar arrays basically to roll out like a yoga mat once they're in place outside the space station. This video comes from the deployment of the first 2 high-ROSA solar arrays back in June of 2021. We'll see a very similar appearance, very similar process for the rollout of this next pair after they're delivered to the station on CRS-26. These rollout solar arrays are different than conventional solar arrays because the conventional solar arrays fold up like an accordion. These roll out like a yoga mat, as I mentioned. It allows them to fit inside smaller containers and a smaller launch volume. NASA plans to use this rollout solar array technology on the Gateway space station around the moon. It was also used by NASA's DART asteroid mission, which impacted an asteroid back at the end of September to demonstrate the planetary defense technique. So this rollout solar array technology was developed by a company called Deployable Space Systems, which is now part of Redwire. And these solar arrays were built at Redwire's factory in Southern California, in Goleta, California. And 2 of these are currently buttoned up for launch inside the trunk of the Dragon cargo capsule on top of the Falcon 9 rocket. 13.5 minutes remaining until the launch opportunity today at 3:54 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 2 minutes, 10 minutes, and counting. If you're just joining us, you're watching live views from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Looking at the very top of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket at the Dragon cargo capsule with the U.S. flag and the NASA worm logo on the side. Propellant loading is entering the final stages at Pad 39A. The second stage is already full of kerosene fuel. The first stage is being loaded with kerosene and liquid oxygen right now. Liquid oxygen is also flowing into stage 2 at this time. In parallel with the propellant loading, cryogenic helium is also being loaded into the vehicle. This provides a pressurant to maintain pressure inside the propellant tanks as that fuel and oxidizer is consumed in flight. 9 minutes, 10 seconds remaining until launch. Still a dreary afternoon here at Kennedy Space Center. In the background, if you look closely, you can see some of the waves breaking in the Atlantic coast and the Starship launch tower positioned just behind the Dragon spacecraft here in this view of Pad 39A. The lower right is the very top of the strongback structure. That will retract to an angle of about 1.5 degrees from the vehicle. You may see that motion here in a few minutes. And you can see some of the quick disconnects in the umbilicals. They're connecting up to the second stage and the Dragon spacecraft service section. Those will be severed at liftoff when that strongback retracts to allow the Falcon 9 to climb off the pad. 8.5 minutes until launch now. One of the next major milestones in the countdown will be the chill down or thermal conditioning of the 9 LM-1D engines at the bottom of the Falcon 9's first stage. This chill down involves flowing small amounts of super cold liquid oxygen chilled to several hundred degrees below zero through the engine plumbing. This thermally conditions these engines and some of the piping in those engines leading to those engines against the thermal shock as propellants flow into those engines at ignition. That chill down will begin at T-minus 7 minutes 30 seconds. Weather continues to be watched closely here at Kennedy Space Center to see if this mission will have a chance to get off the ground today. Three weather rules still red at this time. Minutes, 7 minutes and counting. After liftoff, the Falcon 9 will be heading on a trajectory to the northeast from Kennedy Space Center, lining up with the orbital track of the International Space Station. SpaceX's drone ship, just read the instructions, is positioned about 200 miles or about 300 kilometers downrange in the Atlantic Ocean, roughly due east of Jacksonville, Florida. That's where the first stage booster will target a landing about 7.5 minutes after liftoff.
Stage 1 fuel load complete.
The second stage will continue into orbit with the Dragon cargo capsule. We just heard the call from SpaceX Launch Control that the kerosene fuel load on the first stage of the Falcon 9 has been completed. So about 46,000 gallons of rocket-grade kerosene has been loaded into the Falcon 9 this afternoon. Liquid oxygen continues flowing into the vehicle for another few minutes. The liquid oxygen system will be secured for flight at about T-minus 2 minutes. Also at this time in the countdown, final checks are underway on the navigation systems on the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft. The Dragon spacecraft will be switched to internal power in about T-minus 5 minutes.
Dragon is in terminal count.
For the call the Dragon is in terminal count, so it's being transitioned to launch mode and internal power. In the next few moments, we should see the strongback begin retracting from the Falcon 9 rocket. That process begins with the opening of clamps that encircle the second stage of the Falcon 9. And then we'll see that strongback decline about 1.5 degrees from the vehicle. T-minus 4 minutes.
Launch Director, the countdown net. Our launch weather officer has received his final set of data for today's launch attempt and is no-go for the opportunity. From a launch management standpoint, we will continue to count for the purposes of simplicity with our automation, and we'll stop at T-minus 60 seconds, at which time launch control will say the 3 magic words and end the launch attempt. So for now, the clock will continue to count for an additional 2.5 minutes.
We heard the call there from SpaceX's launch director that the CRS-26 mission will not be launching today. No huge surprise given the weather conditions here at Kennedy Space Center. The Falcon 9 countdown will be continuing for a couple more minutes down to about T-minus 60 seconds, and we'll hold there. But again,
Stage 1, last load complete.
confirmation received that the launch will not be happening today due to poor weather at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Again, the main weather concerns this afternoon here at Kennedy Space Center have involved precipitation, rainfall, as well as cloud cover, which could trigger lightning as the Falcon 9 climbs through the atmosphere. With this launch not happening today, the next launch opportunity for the CRS-26 resupply mission will be no earlier than Saturday at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is 19:20 or 7:20 p.m. UTC. The launch will not be able to occur over the next few days due to restrictions from the Federal Aviation Administration, which maintains airspace. And of course, the Thanksgiving holiday is Thursday here in the U.S. That's a very busy travel period, and the FAA has
Stage 2, last load complete.
wants to ensure airspace around the country, including around the
Dragon
Space
is in
Center,
auto idle.
are free for air travel during this period. We expect the countdown clock to terminate at T-minus 60 seconds. That's the point at which the Falcon 9's auto sequence should begin during the countdown if the count were to proceed for launch.
Hold, hold, hold. Launch abort has started.
And there's the call from SpaceX Launch Control to hold the clock at T-minus 60 seconds. So this ends the countdown for today's launch attempt. Of course, we heard the call a few moments ago from Launch Control that the weather was not going to cooperate for liftoff today. And this CRS-26 cargo mission to the International Space Station is now being rescheduled for no earlier than Saturday at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7:20 p.m. UTC. continue to stream these views from Pad 39A for a bit longer, as long as we receive them. Again, the launch of the CRS-26 cargo mission is not happening today. It's now been rescheduled for Saturday at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7:20 p.m. UTC. That would result in a docking of the Dragon cargo capsule at the ISS at around 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time Sunday. That will be followed by hatch opening to begin unpacking the internal cargo from the Dragon pressurized cargo cabin, and the space station's robot arm will extract the 2 rollout solar arrays from the trunk of the Dragon spacecraft, attach them to the truss of the space station, and that'll set the stage for a pair of spacewalks in early December to install and deploy the 2 new solar arrays. SpaceX's launch team will now oversee the draining of propellants from the Falcon 9 rocket. The rocket was fully loaded for liftoff at 3:54 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but of course the weather remained no-go for launch, and SpaceX was unable to get the mission off the ground. Another Falcon 9 rocket is currently awaiting a launch opportunity tonight, a few miles down the coast from Pad 39A at Pad 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That launch is scheduled for 9:57 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. That's 2:57 a.m. UTC, with the Eutelsat 10B broadband satellite to provide internet connectivity for applications such as in-flight connectivity for airline passengers, as well as maritime communications. So with that, again, the launch of the CRS-26 mission is not happening today. We thank you for joining us for our live coverage of this launch attempt. We'll be back this evening beginning around 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time for the scheduled launch of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Eutelsat 10B satellite a few miles down the coast. That launch is scheduled at 9:57 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, weather permitting. The weather conditions for that launch are also looking fairly unfavorable. The most recent update there showed a 90% chance of unfavorable weather for launch tonight, but as we saw today, the forecast did improve slightly for this afternoon's launch attempt. We'll see if the trend continues for tonight. So again, thanks for joining us. We'll see you later tonight. I'm Stephen Clark, reporting live from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Have a great afternoon.